Good evening. Chris Skinner here, reporting live from Lawrenceville, Illinois. And don't worry if you don't know where that is, most people don't. To borrow a great opening line from a great reporter, Walter Winchell, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, from border to border, coast to coast, and all the ships at sea. We have breaking news here. Once again, the Department of Defense has announced senior military leadership is once again embroiled in yet another bribery scandal, another failure in ethical leadership. According to the Washington Times, Christina Wong, the Navy has suspended two admirals in a broadening bribery scandal that had already ensnared three other senior naval officials in bribery and prostitution allegations. It seems the end is nowhere near for these ethical violations in the military. The allegations of a continued and egregious breach of ethical standards by military personnel seems to involve a pay-for-play scenario, which of course we see so often now playing out these days in the news between military leaders, contractors, civilian officials, and DoD personnel. The question is often raised, are these isolated incidents or an alarming new trend in our military services? According to a recently released report by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, this recent incident is only one in a long list of growing trends on a list of significant ethical lapses by top military officials, senior officers, enlisted personnel, and Department of Defense personnel and contractors. According to the GAO report, which was first reported on by the Navy Times in 2015, some military leaders have failed to take corrective action, either recommended or mandated by both the Pentagon and Congress. This failure in leadership has allowed for a continuing and increasing number of ethical lapses. The GAO, however, did applaud efforts by both the Air Force and Army leadership to comply with mandates and recommendations put forth by the GAO in front of Congress and Pentagon officials in 2014 to help manage and correct the current troubling trends. So, what's at work here? Why are so many military and Department of Defense officials falling into these ethical issues? What is the root cause of such unethical behavior in an organization, a large organization, whose ethos statement is that of honor, courage, and commitment? Many suggest that these are just individual actions by a few rogue personnel based on their own unethical mindsets or their faulty personality traits. But how could that be true, since this trend has been an increasing trend since 2008? While it may be true in some cases, the overwhelming evidence is that these ethical lapses seem to be more related to the lack of oversight, the lack of accountability and transparency, and the lack of ethical training received by all Department of Defense, civilian, and military personnel. The GAO found in its report that less than 5%, that's less than 5%, of the total force had any formal ethics training, and any follow on training force wide was literally non existent. So they have no training being presented in the front end and no follow on training throughout their time in service or career at the Department of Defense. This seems like an egregious failure in leadership. How can so many people entrusted with so much lack the training to make the ethical decisions they need to do? This is not to say that the majority of military and DoD personnel don't operate ethically on a day to day basis. This is a call for new, improved, and continuous training in the ethical conduct that they should be conducting when involved with anyone uh, inside or outside the government. The need for a comprehensive review of current standards of conduct, ethical standards of conduct, and the implementation of an in depth and continuous ethics training program seems paramount for the Department of Defense and military forces. Yet, all too often, these forces seem unwilling or unable to comply with even the basic requests from the GAO or Congress to change direction. New leadership may be needed. From the top down, they say it's where change comes. But if the trend has been trending since 2008, when does it stop? The GAO also reported that when surveyed, DoD personnel thought that unethical behavior might even be rewarded, which is why they often did not report it for fear of retribution and reprisal. This type of behavior has to stop. This type of environment has to stop. The military and the DoD have to operate in a manner that is consistent with the good order and discipline that they tout so often. These lapses in ethical leadership can have devastating consequences up and down the chain of command. Not, not just on readiness and deployability, but morale. If if junior personnel see their leadership being relieved on a continuous basis for a lack of confidence or for violations of basic ethical standards, how is that going to make them feel? They're not going to feel very well. Matter of fact, they're going to question the organization which they are now attached to. So it is imperative that the Department of Defense and military leaders get together and come up with a comprehensive ethical training program to change this trend. It is an imperative for readiness and the overall public uh, affairs